All right. Good morning, KW Prosperity. It's Matt and Mary Beth with you here today. Welcome back for our second session. I keep getting the days all mixed up, but yes, our second
Second
session
session.
of the MREA.
Right.
Yesterday, we talked about the fundamentals. So we talked about, listings, lead, and leverage, and all the basic fundamentals. Whereas today, we're now going to be shifting into pages 47 to pages 64, which is about the Mythunderstandings. And ultimately, this is where we were starting with the Think a Million. So when we're looking at the path of a millionaire real estate agent, it goes through Think a Million, Earn a Million, Net a Million, and Receive a Million. And today we're going to really highlight the Think a Million. And I think you did a great job opening this up before we got on the call. But for those on Facebook Live who were on here, talking about ego and about good leaders and about bad leaders and characteristics that they have.
Yes, that
Which
is
is,
true.
I think, a good.
And the last thing I said was stay teachable and
Yep.
rebuild.
Yep.
Stay teachable and rebuild. Because we are in a time that we've never seen before. I forget what call we were on. We're talking about, when nobody has ever been through a pandemic. And so we're just on uncharted waters. We have to do this together. And the only way to do that is to stay flexible, teachable, and rebuild. Something else that I said before that, though, was to maybe apologize to those that you've wronged.
Yep.
We're all at fault for certain things, and just to repair those relationships. Relationships are so important. Without relationships, none of these models, systems, none of it works. If you are not looking to get into relationship with a database of people, right?
Absolutely. And I think as we shift into this Think a Million and we go to page 47, the Mythunderstandings, this chapter did start with a quote. So I'm going to read that by Henry Ford, which he said, "Whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right." And ultimately, we're going to get into the sixth Mythunderstandings, which really saying at best, your beliefs can lead to great confidence. And at worst, they can lead to extreme doubt. And the doubt is what's going to prevent you from actually trying something or going, with 100% effort into something.
Yeah, and just before we dive into the six, I want to back it up for a second, because this triangle that we're talking about, which Matt is referencing, it kind of it got the listings, the leads, and the leverage. But as we climb up that triangle, thinking is at the bottom, earning, netting, receiving. And as we move forward in the book, I want us to keep remembering that our four models that we are going to be discussing move right along with that. And in order to get the full business model in place, our goal here is to let you understand the triangle and how you get to that top of receiving. Well, and it has to start with the thinking.
I was just going to say, when you're looking at the triangle, the base of the triangle, the biggest piece is the think piece. So before you can even get to receiving a million, which is the end goal, you first have to lay that foundation, that big base to think a million. And a lot of that is overcoming some fears that we internally have.
That's right.
And the first one of the six Mythunderstandings that Gary talks about is the myth is I can't do it. The truth is until you try, you can't possibly know what you can or can't do.
That's right.
And right now we're looking at page 49 and page 50 and 51. The one thing that I liked that Gary wrote here is think about, he was talking about in a classroom setting, he was a teacher and he was talking about him and his students. One thing that I liked that he wrote is, how would you talk to, if you have children or if you have a child, how do you speak to your children? Do you say, oh, you can't do that, or your dream's too big? Like, you speak to yourself how you speak to your children if you have one, or if you have a niece or a nephew, speak to yourself mentally how you're speaking to them.
That's right. It's a really great way to look at it. And he also mentions here is that until you try, you can't possibly know what what's possible. So before saying I can't, think about, if I could, what would it look like?
Yep.
What does it have to look like in order for me to actually do it? And then assess, because there are going to be some things that that are going to maybe, it's going to take a little time.
Mhm.
You need some more experience. You may need some leverage. You may need to identify that. But to just come to that resolution of, no, I can't.
Yep.
Great point is, how would you speak to your children?
And I like what he said here is he writes, an even greater truth that high achievers have long discovered. Once you try and achieve one thing you thought might not be possible, it becomes easier and easier for you to see the impossible and then achieve it. And that's where we talked a little bit yesterday. We talked about Mount Everest, but I knew the 4 minute mile was coming up, and page 52 was where he was actually talking about that, how, um, you know, he was talking about John Landy, who was an Australian runner. He was trying to do the 4 minute mile, and he, just couldn't quite do it. Yet this other guy, Roger Bannister, he decided to break it down into chunks of 1 minute. So he would run a quarter mile under a minute, another quarter mile under a minute, another quarter mile. So he broke it down and created a system for himself. And then he finally completed it at 3 minutes and 59 seconds.
Mm.
And then, ironically, John Landy, the Australian runner, ended up breaking it not too long after that. So once he saw that it was possible, that mental hurdle, he pushed through and then was able to do what Roger Bannister did.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that yesterday in what I've experienced as far as the GCI threshold,
Mm-hmm.
the unit count threshold in our industry. Over the last 5 years, I would say it's really exponentially jumped as to what has been possible, and I believe it's through the technology that
Mm-hmm.
Keller Williams Technology Command is hands down what I believe the best in our industry, and yet technology itself has leveraged the real estate agent to do more with the same amount of time,
Mm-hmm.
more efficient, more productive. And so if we take a look at the last 5 years in how many units were done individually by the largest teams, largest individuals, it's gone from where they're earning 3 million in GCI to like, wow, that's amazing,
Mm-hmm.
to a few years ago, we saw the 10 million in GCI annual income that get met.
Yep.
And then just last year, we saw 24.5 or 20, almost 25 million in GCI
Mm-hmm.
um, be created from one of our largest teams. So I think, we've seen that in the industry. I also said we're blessed because we have a environment where our law of the lid, our inner circle, our top agents are doing 250 transactions, and they have every goal to get to 400 transactions.
Yep.
And yet this goes really to the I can is going to have a lot to do with your environment and who you surround yourself with, people.
Matters.
Yep.
Well, absolutely. And then, so then the second myth, as we step out of that one, and I feel like I
Mm,
hear this a lot, um, or I've heard this a lot from agents. The myth is, well, it can't be done in my market.
that's right.
And the truth is, yes, it can, but you may need a new approach. And where I've heard this a couple times is when we'll be at Mega Camp, and there will be somebody on stage, and they'll say, well, this is what I'm doing to connect with my sphere, whether it's, I stand at a grocery store and hand that stuff out, and then I'll hear some, well, that's not going to work in New York City or in New Jersey for XYZ reason.
Mm,
But the reality is, and what Gary's writing on page 54, he says the truth is, if it's been done in another market, it can be done in your market. What I want you to realize is that once it has been done, no matter where, it's just a matter of finding out how that can be possible in your world.
yes.
So until you
Yeah,
try the approach, you're not going to know if it's going to work or not.
that's right. And I raise my hand on that one only because I've had the opportunity to be involved with a bunch of our Keller Williams market centers in the last, 16 years,
Mhm.
right? And so I literally spent 9 years of the last 16 in one area, which is where I grew up, which is where I knew the houses in and out. The market behaved a certain way. We knew what the price per square foot was. There was a certain, I was just comfortable with it. It was 9 years in one market. When I left that market, it was a suburban market. I then moved into Hoboken, which was a vertical market, which is very much price per square foot.
Yep.
And the location inside of a city has everything to do with your price point, uptown, downtown, close to the train, water views, all sorts of stuff that really wasn't something that was in the suburban Monmouth County market. Then I went down to the Jersey Shore, down to the bottom of New Jersey, which
Mhm.
is very second home. But then there's inland where people do reside and have an amazing life down there. Then I was in Brooklyn, New York. Many people know Brooklyn, the pace of Brooklyn, and then to Staten Island, and now to Passaic County in New Jersey.
Yeah.
So I too believed I had a limiting belief when I was in that Monmouth County is, well, could it really be done in this market? Is it, I don't know, those city agents, they do that, or well, that's really like a seasonal thing or a Florida thing, or, and I can honestly tell you, hands down, my thing has been that this book has been true in any market. You
Yep.
literally just plug the numbers in. You have to get yourself out of your own way. You have to think about how could I do it in my market.
Yep.
These are models and systems, and so if it could be done in Iowa, it could be done in Kalamazoo.
Well, and Mary Beth, to your point, if most people or a lot of people in your area have that same, oh, this isn't going to work in my market, if they have that same attitude, if you're the one that says, you know what, this can be done, I just have to figure out how to do it, you're going to be the first one to do it. And you're going
Well,
to be the
you're
first
going to
one,
be the 4 minute mile guy.
you're going to have a distinct advantage in your marketplace because ultimately you figured it out. And whoever's, if, you know, you have to be first. Even if it's not perfect, you got to be first.
Just be first, and then don't think that first is going to stay first, because second's got a really great agenda. So you
Absolutely.
just keep it moving.
Well,
Keep
so now once you, you know, achieve, you figure out how it's going to work in your market, you might have success, you're going to start to, you know, get busier. Then the next myth that comes in is it would take too much time and effort. I would lose my freedom. The truth is time and effort are not the deciding factors in success. And you can talk about that. We talked a little bit about that yesterday with leverage, the people, systems, and the tools.
Well, I mean, this was a simple one. We don't even have to spend that much time on it.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure we all have the same 24 hours
Yep.
and 7 days a week and 365. I mean, that's just how we use our time is so important.
Hmm.
And I would challenge you that if you are that person that's just saying, it would just take that I don't have the time, it's too much. I would challenge you to, there's a simple activity to write down your day, track your week for 1 week, track your day.
Yep.
Every 30 minutes, just jot it down in a notebook. What were you doing? What'd
Yep.
you spend that 30 minutes on? And it will be things like I was eating, I was sitting with my husband,
Yep.
I was making some phone calls, I was on a Zoom. So you start to track your day, and you're going to see where you can actually create some pockets of productivity.
Yeah, and especially right now that we're all at home, it's the best time to really fine tune your systems and really start to, you know, fine tune the tools that you have in your arsenal.
Yes, and for those who are homeschooling their children, it may be a little more challenging. For
Yeah.
those who, no, and for those who have multiple
No, you're
pets,
right.
it's not normally a distraction, and now it's a
Yeah.
distraction. Definitely different environments, but to your point is we have a lot of time on our hands
Hmm.
to absolutely create a schedule that will work for us,
Yep.
and we're in control of that. Focus on what you can control.
Yep.
Your schedule is one of those. What you say yes and what you say no to, you can control. And I'm speaking out loud, and I'm speaking to my own self. So,
I love it.
you have to constantly be reminded, which is why we should watch these videos over again.
For sure. And so now as we segue out of that one, the fourth myth understanding is the myth, it's too
Uh,
risky, I'll lose money.
yeah.
And the truth is that risk is in direct proportion to how well you hold your incremental costs accountable to producing incremental results. So
Yes.
essentially, this is coming back to the expense management that we went into in the Shift series, tactic number 2. Basically, there's two kinds of people. You've got the people who say it costs too much, and there's the
Hmm.
people who say, well, we can't afford not to do it. So really, ultimately, the millionaire real estate agents, the top agents that Gary interviewed, understand that if you hold your costs accountable for corresponding incremental results, if you stay engaged after you write the check and evaluate the direct results of writing that check before writing more, you can greatly minimize your risks. So speak to what you were going to say.
Well, here It's 11:18. I want to read a little something because this here is a mind shift.
Yep.
It comes from U Squared, which is Price Pritchett. It's a small little paperback. It's really the story of the fly that continues to do the same thing over and over again, which is bang into that window,
Yep.
knowing that there's a door open just a few feet away.
Yep.
And this one is, I read this often to plenty of people that are trying to make decisions in their lives. And right now, it might be that you're just trying to make a decision with your day as to what to do.
Hmm.
So it says, choose a different set of risks. The risk hits you as rather apparent and may be quite threatening, but you must stack them up against the hidden risks that you accept when you decide to live with the status quo. Ask yourself what you're risking if you do not go for a quantum leap.
Yep.
The risk is that you won't get what you really want out of life. You've got to understand that you can never escape risk. It's not something you can decide to live with or without. Something is always at stake. You can only decide which risks to take.
Yep.
Whether you choose to go for a quantum leap or to follow your usual routines, you're putting something on the line. So choose carefully and don't kid yourself with the idea that playing it safe by living with the status quo gives you your best odds. That may be the surest way of losing. Quantum leaps do mean that to some degree you must move beyond the zone of familiarity, security, and comfort, but you can make the jump to U Squared without being reckless or impulsive. Frankly, making a quantum leap is not a mere gambling, it's not a crapshoot. You simply move on an opportunity that you've been ignoring. You abandon your excuses. You reframe the problem. You take a completely different chance. A quantum leap is risking in a way that unmasks the truth, revealing how the only thing of significance that has been standing in the way is you.
Hmm.
Risk believing in yourself. Risk acting on the assumption that you can succeed in making a quantum leap. Otherwise, the risk is that you will settle for only a fraction of what life has to give to you. This isn't a case of taking a big chance. It's a matter of giving yourself a big chance. The major obstacle to overcoming the odds is never challenging them until you test the limits regarding what you can achieve. You can't truly know what your chances really are, and the odds change in your favor when you begin to challenge them. But if you try to minimize your vulnerability by avoiding a new set of risks, you will kill your chance for a quantum leap.
Hmm. I like that.
So
No, I think it's a
you choose.
powerful passage in that book.
Mhm.
Um, and I think, as you're saying, you do have to take some risks, and I think one thing that this section's saying in this book is you have to be smart about the risks that you're taking. You want to be a risk taker. You want to be the person who's saying we can't afford not to do it. You want to be an abundant thinker, not a scarcity thinker. And with that, one thing that Gary talks about on page 58 is the best way to be smart about it is to play red light, green light with all of your expenses. So once you are ready to try something, do it. But before you start adding on more stuff, play the red light, green light. Are you making a profit? Correct. Correct.
And they can revisit, I believe it's
That's
tactic
the
two,
two.
right? Tactic two is remargin your expense management. And we just went through that. So great connection there.
And as Gary says, any dollar you spend that increases your net profits is ultimately a dollar well invested. So, when you're playing red light, green light, you just have to hold each dollar accountable, and that's really the critical thing. So the fifth misunderstanding is number 5. The myth is my clients will only work with me. Only I can deliver quality service. The truth, and this is something this is one of my favorite of the 6, is your clients aren't loyal to you. They're loyal to the standards you represent. And the reason why it's one of my favorites is because, one of the myths of, oh, if I put in more hours, I'm going to have less time to spend with family, or, the risks involved. But ultimately, I think people think that they need to do everything, that people are buying into you, and that the only reason they're working with you is because of you, when the reality is it's because of the standards that you set out. You know, the example that they use in this book, they use Disney World. And I always love that example. They use Ritz-Carlton. Think of any place that you go to that has a really top-notch level of service. It's
Mhm.
not because of any one person why you want to go back. It's because the standards and the level of service that is being provided is consistent, and there's an expectation to it. And the same has to be applied to your business. That as you grow staff, as you grow your business, as people come into your world, you just need to know what makes your business unique to you, and make sure that those standards are then being upheld by the people in your world.
That's right. And I would just question, what are your standards,
Yep.
right? So people have a challenge with this myth, and because they haven't set their standards or their expectations or operations manuals for their business. And so when you ask them, if I needed to take over for one of our top agents,
Yep.
would they literally be able to say, hey, here's how I do it?
Yep.
And could they train me to just replace them? And that's really, and if not, then that's where that fear comes, is that my client base won't, they do need me because I have not replaced myself. I don't have an idea of what my expectations are. So
Well, and what I like that he writes, and I think because I'm a systems-oriented person, so I can appreciate this, he writes, systems are simply roadmaps, instructions that allow these standards to be repeated and duplicated easily. So, as you're talking about what makes you unique, what are those things, write them down, make kind of your operations manual
that's
in terms
right.
of what makes you you. Because any system, it's not a system if it can't be duplicated or repeated.
Just get it started. So some people would say, I don't even know, I don't have one. What do I think I need an assistant for that. No, you don't. All you need to do is every time you do something with a client, just start to get a Word doc open on your computer, notes something that every time you're doing something with a customer, you're moving them forward into the next phase.
Mhm.
Just kind of jot down I sent them a CMA, I did a buyer consultation, got their stuff signed. That then starts to create, because then you can organize that list, and then that is your operations manual. I think we're overthinking some of this stuff, and I want to, as we're going through the book, I want to break it down to
Mhm.
a really tangible action that you can take.
Yep. Well,
Okay.
the clients are going to actually get better service once the standards are in place, because you can't be in 10 places at once. Yet if you have somebody else who is implementing your standards, they're actually going to
Mhm.
get quicker service.
And when you're working like we do, because we do think about everything, when you lay it out, then you can actually reflect on it and say, what do I want to add to it? What do I want to take away? Instead of just every time you're doing something, you're reinventing the wheel. There's no need to do that.
Yep.
I find that we get a little sharper and more focused, and we add more value into what we're doing when we have the time to actually look at the process that we laid out. So I just want to encourage agents who are like, I'm fighting that, I don't have standards, it's me that they need. Start jotting down what you do and see how you can create that as that is your business.
So
And the
the
sixth,
last, yeah, I was going to say the last myth, the number 6, the myth is having a goal and not fully realizing it as a negative thing, where the truth is having a goal and not trying to achieve it as a negative thing.
yeah, I think a lot of people get stuck there in that.
You're a failure.
Yes, and they use a word called cockrophobia or something like that, right?
Yeah, I couldn't pronounce that.
Cockrophobia. It's the fear of failing, and I think it's what stops so many of us. Even some that you see as a success, it's stopping so many of us to go to that next level. In that, just fear. So if you're not really even realizing what your goal is, then you have no chance at succeeding.
Yep. Well, and we're going to be talking a little bit about that tomorrow in terms of think powered by a big why. So that's going to kind of circle
But
back to that.
yeah, and so Gary and Jay, they use and Dave, they use an example of Abraham Lincoln.
Yep.
Think about where we would be if Abraham Lincoln didn't press on.
Yeah.
And that sixth myth is really just press on. You said it before, if it's not perfect, who cares? Just do it. It's better that you did it, and then you can refine it and refine it. Some of you have been thinking about doing a buyer seminar forever. Just do one. and then next month do another one and make it better and better and better. And so if you read on page 62, it kind of, or 61 and 62, it lays out Abraham Lincoln's
Yep.
path. And
Yep.
so some of us may not really know, it shows, you don't know who he's talking about yet, but 1832, failed in business, bankrupt. 1832, defeated for legislature. 1834, failed in business, bankrupt again.
Yep.
35, fiance died. 36, nervous breakdown. 38, defeated in the election. 43, 48, defeated in U.S. Congress. 55, he defeated in U.S. Senate. 56, defeated for vice president, and 58, defeated for U.S. Senate. He did not get elected until 1860.
Yep.
Some of us would have stopped. This man went on. He pressed on for how many years? Since 1832, you're talking about 20-something years of just what we would look at as failure, failure, failure. And he was just pressing on for something even greater than he probably ever even imagined.
Well, I like that he writes, if there's anything that history bears out is that failure almost always precedes success.
That's right.
And I love that because you can't fail unless you quit. You've got to plug out. And we kind of talked about this at the end of the Shift series. You can fail forward.
Forward.
Don't look at something as a failure and get out of it. Look at it as an opportunity to move forward.
Yeah, that's one that disappeared off my shelf. I have to get that back. John Maxwell, Failing Forward. Great book.
Well, so I think we covered the 6 Mythunderstandings today, which really takes us to the end of page 64. Tomorrow we're continuing in the think section. There's 9 ways the MREA thinks. I would imagine we'll probably do half of them, maybe the first 4 or 5 tomorrow, and then the other 4 or 5 on Monday. So that way we can dive a little bit into the 9 different ways the MREA thinks.
And I just, in summing that up, I want to mention that there's something important here, which they bring into the bold curriculum. And it's really embedded in our language is there is no try.
Yep.
The word is intend. If we try, we'll constantly be in the trying state and we'll never get to it. So we take that word out, and if any of you are Star Wars friends, Yoda says it, there is no try, only do.
Do or do not. Yeah.
Do or do not. And I have a question here from back in 2011 that I wrote in this book is, what is holding you back? So if you go back and you look at the pages that we covered, Matt and I, and take a look at what myth is actually holding you back and what do you need to overcome. And once again, if you need to reach out to Matt and I for a consult or you'd like more resources, please feel free to reach out to us, email, inbox, or message us and give us a call.
Yeah, just let us know. All right. Well, thanks, guys, for tuning in. We'll see you guys tomorrow.
Thanks, Matt.
Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.